This video provides an overview of aircraft operations at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport and in the surrounding airspace. We'll talk about how air traffic operates, the complexities of airspace in the greater Puget Sound area, and the procedures air traffic controllers use to keep airplanes safely separated. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, also known as SEA, and the nearby airports form a complex airspace that operates over a population of more than 4 million people in King, Kitsap, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. The region is served by numerous airports with commercial flights, test flights, smaller general aviation propeller aircraft, business jets, and military flights. Each airport, regardless of its size or the type of aircraft that operate there, has its own airspace with dedicated arrival and departure routes that guide aircraft in and out of the Puget Sound area, connecting to the larger National Airspace System, or NAS. These airports serve a wide range of aircraft of different sizes with varying performance capabilities. It is critical to keep different types of aircraft and the numerous traffic flows separated from each other. The primary responsibility of the FAA's air traffic control system is to provide the safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic. This is done by teams of FAA air traffic controllers that ensure airplanes are safely separated while maintaining the most efficient flow of air traffic. Air traffic control requires great precision and is highly complex. When an airport is constructed, the runways are built to align with the most common wind directions in the area. This is because aircraft take off and land into the wind to maximize performance and safety. In the Puget Sound area, winds are variable, but primarily come from the north and south. Most airports in the region have primary runways that are also aligned north and south. As shown in this animation, SEA Airport has 3 runways. Since each runway end is treated as a separate surface, there are actually 6 runways. Runway identification is based on the magnetic compass heading the aircraft is facing as it lands or takes off. For example, runway 16 and 34 is oriented with a magnetic compass heading of approximately 160 degrees in one direction and 340 degrees in the opposite direction. If you drop the 0 at the end of the compass heading, you will get 16 and 34. Parallel runways are further designated with L for left, C for center, and R for right as you approach or depart the runway. At SEA Airport, aircraft will land and take off to the north or south, depending on the direction of the wind. This example shows aircraft taking off and landing to the south. In south flow, which is approximately 70% of the time, aircraft typically depart on runway 16 center and 16 left and land on runway 16 right and 16 left. Aircraft use 2 runways for landing and 2 for arrival, which creates an efficient throughput both on the ground and in the air. In a congested area like the Puget Sound, airports that may seem far apart by car are very close to each other when traveling by air. Aircraft operate using both instruments and visual references. These 2 types of flying are called Instrument Flight Rules (IFR) and Visual Flight Rules (VFR). These types of flying require different levels of air traffic guidance. However, all aircraft must maintain safe separation from each other and terrain. Air traffic controllers help manage and separate all types of aircraft, from the largest commercial jet to the smallest propeller aircraft. IFR aircraft flying at the same altitude must remain a minimum lateral distance from each other. In airspace surrounding airports, the minimum lateral distance is 3 miles. In higher altitude airspace, the minimum lateral distance is 5 miles. Where aircraft do not meet the minimum lateral separation requirements, they must remain a minimum vertical distance from each other. Below 41,000 feet, aircraft must remain at least 1,000 feet above or below one another. For example, when the airports in Puget Sound area land to the north, aircraft landing at SEA Airport and Boeing Field operate in the same vicinity and have numerous crossing routes. In order to maintain the minimum required vertical separation, air traffic controllers give compass headings and altitude direction to pilots. For example, this animation shows an SEA Airport arrival and a Boeing Field arrival. The aircraft landing at Boeing Field will stay above the SEA airport's final approach, then continue its descent to be below aircraft on the east side of SEA Airport. Additionally, our area is unique due to the Boeing Company operations at Renton Airport, Payne Field, and Boeing Field, where aircraft are built, flight tested, and ultimately delivered to customers all over the world. In addition to these airports, there are numerous other general aviation airports in the Puget Sound area, which predominantly serve propeller and business jet aircraft with limited commercial service. Many of these general aviation operations are small propeller training aircraft that fly a pattern around an airport to land and take off. Most airports have their own voluntary noise abatement best practices for pilots to reduce impacts on neighboring communities. Not only are there operations from multiple airports in the region, but there are also helicopter and seaplane operations. Helicopters are used by the military, news agencies, law enforcement, emergency medical services, flight training, and sightseeing operations. Seaplanes are aircraft that operate to and from the Sound and area lakes. As you can see, there are many layers to managing airspace, including high traffic volume, proximity of surrounding airports, helicopter and seaplane routes, and weather. All of this is accomplished every day by a team of highly trained air traffic controllers.
Hello, my name is Sean Hopkins, and I'm the air traffic manager at Seattle TRACON, where we manage air traffic from Olympia to Everett. I've been involved with air traffic for over 34 years. This presentation will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for the arrivals and departures at the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport and a few of the surrounding airports. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north at the top. The name of each flight procedure is shown by an arrow on the map containing a 5-letter name. Arrows for arrival procedures point toward the airport, while arrows for departure procedures point away from the airport. For example, this board shows 2 departure procedures, Banger and Harib. These are called SIDs, or Standard Instrument Departures. The spelling of each departure and arrival procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of BANGR departure is pronounced Banger. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that the aircraft fly to. Just as with the spelling of the procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the ISBRG waypoint would be pronounced iceberg. Each departure board also shows radar flight tracks in purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These radar flight tracks are random sample from March 2024 and show actual aircraft operations over multiple 24-hour periods. The flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These colored paths show the existing published flight paths. Surrounding the paths are dispersed path areas in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. Planes may not fly right down the center of a route. These pink and yellow areas show the typical extent of the dispersal and account for the different routings needed for safety, hazardous weather avoidance, operational needs, or occasional navigational drift. When the aircraft fly in these areas, it is typically due to a pilot receiving a vector from the Seattle Terminal Radar Approach Control, also called the Seattle TRACON. A vector is a compass heading assigned to an aircraft by an air traffic controller. The standard terminal arrival, or STAR procedures, west of the airport use GPS for guidance, while the procedures east of the airport use ground-based navigational aids. From the STAR, ATC uses various methods to guide aircraft to the approach procedure, such as vectors or navigation by GPS. Like the STARs, approach procedures use various means of navigation. The procedure may use traditional ground-based navigation systems, like an instrument landing system approach, or ILS, or the procedure might use precise GPS navigation, like an RNAV approach. RNAV is acronym for Area Navigation that allows properly equipped aircraft to fly precise routes all the way to the runway. In the busy Seattle airspace, aircraft arriving or departing may be vectored off their procedure for safety, sequencing, or hazardous weather. Aircraft that are vectored are given a different heading to fly than the published procedure. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedures. This board shows an overview of airspace at 8 airports in the area. Each airport shown here has an air traffic control tower. As you can see, the airspace in our area is complex and involves numerous air traffic controllers working to control aircraft in these airspaces, as well as aircraft transitioning to and from airports. Air traffic controllers manage thousands of flights per day within this airspace that is part of the overall national airspace system, ensuring the safety of those in the air and on the ground. Aircraft in the Puget Sound area operate in both controlled and uncontrolled airspace. When aircraft are in controlled airspace near an airport, they're in contact with air traffic controllers that give them varying levels of guidance based on aircraft need, weather, and other operational requirements. This board shows the airspace we just looked at with a sample of flight tracks for multiple days in March 2024. Small propeller-driven aircraft and helicopters are more common at these satellite airports and are typically used for training, recreation, news, law enforcement, and sightseeing. Aircraft may stay at their local airport and fly in the traffic pattern, or they may fly to another airport. In addition to the airspace associated with an airport, there are also special use airspace areas south of Joint Base Lewis-McChord. This airspace can be used by civilians. However, it is primarily reserved for military use and is not consistently available for civilian use. This board focuses on flight tracks for Payne, Boeing Field, Sea-Tac, and Renton airports. As noted on the previous board, aircraft may conduct training operations at satellite airports, including Boeing Field and Renton. Many times, training aircraft will stay within the airport traffic pattern. When aircraft fly in the pattern, they generally depart and fly straight until approximately a half mile from the end of runway, or when they are at least 700 feet off the ground. Then the aircraft will follow the pattern to land, repeating the cycle. This board shows published instrument procedures for south flow arrivals to Sea-Tac on runways 16 right, center, and left. South flow is when aircraft land and depart to the south, and is used about 70% of the time in the Seattle area due to prevailing winds out of the south. Aircraft arriving from around the globe are guided into 4 corners of the airspace and then sequenced for landing. We call this a 4-post system. Aircraft arriving from the east are vectored, while those from the west can use a GPS procedure unless sequencing is necessary. This is a zoomed-in view of the south flow operations at Sea-Tac. This board shows the published instrument departure procedure for runway 16 right, center, and left. Again, this is the most common departure direction at Sea-Tac. When aircraft depart, they typically fly straight out approximately 5 miles and climb to 3,000 feet before turning to the east or west. Aircraft turning to the east are vectored to join a published procedure. As you can see on the map, aircraft join one of 5 main departure procedures to exit the Seattle airspace. In this zoomed-in view, we can see aircraft flying to the west are typically given clearance to fly a SID. Aircraft departing to the west may still be vectored as indicated by the aircraft flight tracks in the pink dispersed path area. This board shows the published instrument procedures for arrivals to Sea-Tac in north flow. Aircraft coming in from the east are vectored to intercept an approach procedure from the final point of the star. For example, aircraft on the Glacier star will fly to Heather waypoint and then be vectored and assigned altitudes to set up for a safe, stabilized approach to landing. This board shows a closer view of the published instrument arrival procedures for north flow. Aircraft arriving from the west will fly along a GPS star unless sequencing is necessary. For example, aircraft on the Mariner star, which connects to an approach procedure, are capable of continuing to the runway using the onboard flight management system to fly the procedure without additional direction from ATC. While the majority of arrivals on the west side fly the GPS arrival, some aircraft must be vectored due to spacing or sequencing purposes. This board shows the published instrument departure procedures for runway 34 right, center, and left. Typically, aircraft depart on runway 34 right and center. When aircraft depart, they typically fly straight for approximately 8 miles and climb to 4,000 feet before turning to the east or west. This board shows a close-in view of north flow departures. Aircraft typically fly within the pink shaded area that indicates the dispersion area. This board shows aircraft operations in north flow during nighttime hours between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. During these hours, aircraft typically use the Jeff Poe departure, which takes aircraft over Elliott Bay and Puget Sound. Since people are more sensitive to noise at night, ATC typically uses this path during north flow. Aircraft with eastern destinations remain over water and are not turned to the east until reaching an altitude of at least 10,000 feet. During south flow, there is no different routing for nighttime operation because there's no option for them to fly over the water. This board shows a close-in view of the JEFPO departure used during nighttime hours. The FAA uses the JEFPO procedure as much as possible, but heavy traffic or other issues such as weather or equipment outages can delay or prevent utilization of the procedure. This board shows Sea-Tac Airport and Boeing Field in north flow. Aircraft must be separated at least 1,000 feet vertically or 3 miles horizontally. Aircraft landing at Boeing are typically lined up on a stable approach between 5 and 15 miles away from the airport. This means aircraft arriving at Boeing Field fly near Sea-Tac arrivals as they turn to line up for final approach. For example, aircraft arriving to Boeing Field on the Olympia arrival generally fly above aircraft that are on final approach to Seattle, then descend and fly an approach procedure into Boeing Field once clear of that traffic.